Welcome to the Live Like It's True podcast, where we look at some of the most interesting and surprising true stories of the Bible. I'm Shannon Popkin, inviting you to open your Bible with me to drink deeply of the story and to live like it's true. If you're here for one of our recent episodes, we're in the Judgy series. So we're looking at stories of judgment and mercy in the Bible and how to live like it's true that our God is a merciful judge. Well, Lisa Appelo, welcome back to Live Like It's True.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, so we talked last time a little bit about Rahab, and I'd love for our guests to go back and listen to that. We also talked about your ministry for grieving people. You have a book called Life Can Be Good Again, where you tell the story of losing your husband 13 years ago as a mom of 7. And I just love the way that you embrace that part of your story and use it to serve other people. But I wanted to call out, there's another part of your background. You used to be a lawyer. Is that correct?
I was.
You were,
I
okay.
was a trial attorney.
A trial attorney. Okay. So that means, like, how does that work?
I was actually a defense. I did civil litigation.
Okay.
And I did mostly professional liability defense.
Okay. Professional liability defense. Okay. Interesting. The only thing I know about courtroom law stuff is like TV shows that have courtroom drama. That's all I know.
Yeah.
And they're probably way a stretch.
Well, my mother always said you should get paid to argue. So I've been trying to ask the Lord to help me get control over that ever since.
Oh, I love that. That's cute. Yeah. We have, one of our kids is like a master arguer, and we have said you would make a really good lawyer. So, but there's something about when you're doing trial, there's something about stories that give testimony, right? How do stories help shape the argument in a court of law?
Well, the story is the whole case. There are certain times that the law itself can impact a case, but the case is going to turn on the facts. And so the more you know, and if you can shape those facts in a certain way, especially, but the more you know about a story and the facts, the more you're able to make the judge, especially, or the jury is able to make a determination.
Okay. So you put people on a witness stand and you train them. It's called a deposition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're training and you're trying to have them tell the story and put the facts out there in a particular way. Like you can do it a bad way and you can do it a right way. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, the deposition is where you're trying to get the facts. You're trying to understand what happened. And then by the time they are testifying, like in a court of law, you, the attorney, want to ask the questions in such a way that the story is told in a certain way.
Okay. So I just think it's interesting that stories play this really important role when there's a judgment to be made.
Yeah.
And in our Bible story that we're looking at, there is a woman who has heard some stories about God. And it's about the God of judgment. And I think that's really intriguing because as we look at our culture today, people know things about God. And I wonder what you think, Lisa. I feel like they've swung the gavel around and put it in their own hands versus approaching God as the judge of the earth with the gavel in his hand. Do you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. We've always done that. If you go all the way back to Genesis, where people were like, I can do things my way. When we see that split, from
Yes.
Adam's children. And so I think, listen, all of us are prone to wander, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prone to say, Lord, I can do it. But yeah, instead of saying, Lord, I recognize that you are a God who I need to submit to. There are those who say, that doesn't square with me and my life and my what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not gonna come under that.
Yeah. in the story of the Bible and the story of the world that we're part of, like the Bible only shines light on the reality that we're living in. God is the judge. Tell us how that is in a courtroom with a judge. Did you ever work with a judge that you found really interesting? Any judge stories, Lisa? Like, I'm just curious about, is it how it is on TV where the judge really has a distinct personality and the attorneys like, oh, well, with this particular judge, you have to approach him this way. Was there any of that you experienced?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And a judge will get to know the attorneys that appear before him or her and will expect certain things from them. So if you have done something, if you have not been honest with the judge, they're going to know that, and they will know that for the next case that you have in front of them. If you have been upfront, or if you've done your due diligence, if you always come prepared, then they come to respect that, from you as well.
Okay. Were there any judges that you worked with who were super merciful or just...
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, mostly my practice was in one town, and we had to go to a big city. So I'm in Florida. We had to go to South Florida. I had a really, really hard case. And I just felt like I got what you call hometown. Like I was from out of town. I didn't know that judge. I didn't really know the other attorneys there. I probably sounded different. I spoke differently.
Yep.
And I felt like we could never really get a good, like the rulings never really favored us. They never really came down our way.
Okay. That's really interesting. Hometown. I've never heard of that. But look at God as the judge. I mean, nobody gets hometowned with God, right?
No.
Because he counts all of the earth as his. And so there's no city that does not fit inside the domain of his rulership. He knows every single one of these cities intimately, and he gives everybody a fair trial, right? And he is the most merciful judge. He's looking for those that he can pardon. That's his whole mindset. He takes his place on the judges. What is it called? The bench. Is it a bench? And he takes his place on the bench, and he's looking. His eyes are scanning to see, who can I show mercy to today? And that's who he sees in Jericho. We're going to pick up the story about Rahab, this prostitute woman who we said last time, 2 Chronicles 16:9, the eyes of the Lord search to and fro, looking for whom he may strongly support. And in this case, he finds one woman in the city of Jericho. We talked about how Jericho is a sinful city, wicked people, the sorts of sins that would make us horrified, right? And he finds one within the city, but she's not this like righteous person. He doesn't show his mercy because of her righteousness. It's because of his righteousness, because he is so good. And so, okay, we are going to get back to this idea of testimony and stories, okay, as we pick up our text. So would you please read for us Joshua 2:8-13.
Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now, therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death.
Okay, so Lisa, what is surprising about what Rahab, the testimony that Rahab has heard? Do you think anything in there is surprising?
Well, the fact that all of this has come to them. I mean, they are not, we think that this was before the internet. This was before, the nightly news. This is before, and yet word has gotten out not just about these Israelites, but about their God.
Yeah.
And she names, she says, we know what your God did in the Red Sea, and we know how you destroyed these other two powerful, powerful nations, and our heart is faint in us. So you can imagine the fear and trembling that they had as they were approaching and camped right on the other side of the river from Jericho.
Yeah. So I've actually been to Israel. Have you been there, Lisa?
I have not. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah. So I got to speak in the Middle East at a couple different places, but we visited Egypt, and so I think we went to, oh my goodness. Yeah, we went to Egypt first. And then I remember flying over the Suez Canal and then heading over to, we flew into Jordan. And so when we were in Jordan, then we drove then to Israel. But I got to see on that. So I kind of had in my head, the map of where is Egypt, which is where these slaves have escaped from, right? The Israelite slaves. This is the first story that Rahab heard, was about them escaping from Egypt. And so I know in my head, like we passed where Jericho was, and it's really high. It's like an elevated place, and you're kind of descending down into Jerusalem. So anyway, I could picture, travelers going, it would be quite a distance, but I could picture them. These were two hubs for travel, Egypt and Jericho. And you could just imagine them, staying. Jericho was a beautiful city. It's one of the most ancient cities on earth. Jericho has a history of over 11,000 years.
Wow.
That is an old city, and it has one of the oldest known defense walls in the world. So there's archaeologists have found evidence of 23 layers in ancient sites of Jericho. So it's this really, really old city. So these people, and its walls, it's famous for its walls. In my Bible, there's a little diagram, and it's like they had double walls. So they had one wall, and then I first pictured it like a super thick wall, but no, it was like, then there was I don't know how many feet or how many yards in between the two, but then, so there was another interior wall, and Rahab must have lived between those two walls. And so anyway, it was a very fortified city, and probably a hub for travelers. And the word had come about these things that, and not just were the Israelites famous, but their God was famous. Mm-hmm. And so they're kind of receiving testimony that would lead them to believe certain things about God. So in verse 10, she says, for we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you. She's talking to these two spies who are Israelites.
Right.
And when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings, you completely destroyed across the Jordan. So she's heard two stories about God that have made him famous to her. You kind of alluded, what's the story of the Red Sea?
So the story of the Red Sea would be when they were coming out of Egypt, and Moses was still their leader, and they got right up against the Red Sea and turned around, and right behind them was the Egyptian army. Changed his mind. Pharaoh was like, we will not actually let you go. And so they are hemmed in. They are between the Red Sea in front of them and the Egyptian army, who is fast on their heels behind them. And God puts his pillar of fire between them and between the Egyptian army during the day. And then all night he has pillar of cloud and then pillar of fire all night, and parts that Red Sea, parts it so that it is dry land. They're not even walking, through an inch of water. He parts it, and every single one of those Israelites is able to cross the Red Sea and go into the peninsula, really, on dry ground. And then as the Egyptian army is still pursuing them and goes into the Red Sea thinking they'll cross it too, God closes that Red Sea around them and destroys all of them.
Okay.
And so, it's one of the most astonishing pictures of God's saving, ability and his mercy.
Mhm. Yeah. So they've heard this story. I'm sure people were like, you should have seen it. It was like nothing you have ever seen, right? People walking through, with walls of water. I always picture like, were you able to reach out and touch,
Yeah.
drag your fingers through that wall of water? It's so curious, but, they walked through on dry ground, like not muddy ground, dry ground. And people are still talking about it. And of course, Pharaoh's army was destroyed. So that made an impression. What do you think the Egyptians thought of that story as they're telling it? If you're a Live Like It's True listener, I'm guessing that you love to study the Bible like I do. We're getting quite a collection here of episodes on Live Like It's True, and I wanted to make it easier for you to search by particular story of the Bible. Maybe you're in a Bible study, you're studying a book of the Bible, or you want to do a deep dive on a particular story. Well, we've done a little work for you on the website, making it easier for you to search. You can now search by section and book of the Bible, and you can also search by series. We have the Judgy series, the Easter series, the True Story of the Beginning series. So you can find all of that at shannonpopkin.com.
Well, I think for the Egyptians, it was also a moment for them to see that he was declaring himself. He was making himself known. It was not just about protecting the Israelites. He did do that. But when every single nation in that whole region, all the way up to, Jericho and further all the way into Egypt, all of them had the ability to know God had declared himself God of heaven and God of earth. Just like Rahab said, she said, we knew from that time that you were the God of heaven and the God of earth. And God had declared that for everybody to know.
Yeah. Well, and I see some parallels right now, in the day and age that we live in. Our God has made it possible for everyone to know that he is the God over heaven and earth. But let's come back to that statement that Rahab makes, because first there's this other story. Do you know that one about Sihon and Og? It's like there isn't really much in the Bible about that one, right?
I'm trying to remember because it wasn't when they were attacked, like I think by the Amorites who came up behind them. So
No.
I'm trying to remember that story.
It's in
honestly.
Numbers. I looked it up and there really isn't a lot there.
Okay.
But somehow Rahab has heard that story as well. And what I think is interesting is look at the contrast in the way she tells these two stories. The first story is how God saved. He dried up the water and you came out. In that story, there was judgment and there was mercy, and she focuses on the mercy. So this is a mercy story. God saved you. Like if the Egyptian army was coming against me, I would want someone to save me. And she's noticing God saved you. And then the other story of the Sihon and Og, this is a story of judgment. There were no survivors after that story. So Rahab hears a story of mercy and she hears a story of judgment. And I think it's important that we hear both, right? I feel like we live in a culture where everybody wants to tell stories of God's mercy, but nobody really wants to talk about his judgment, almost as if we're embarrassed by that. That's the Old Testament God, like we talked about in the last episode. That's really even the church's response would be, well, let's look at the New Testament and look at the God of mercy. But I think to get that fuller testimony of who God is, who this judge is that we stand before, I think we need both kinds of stories, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a holy fear that comes, to know that one day we will stand before God, that every knee will bow, everybody will stand before God. And yet we know under the new covenant, God is both a God of judgment and a God of mercy. Like those aren't separate. He's not one at one time and one, even though these are two separate stories, he's not He's not a God of judgment in one instance and a God of mercy. He is at both times operating fully in both capacities.
Yeah. there's this quote that I love by Dane Ortland. He talks about how we think that it's God's wrath that is all pent up and, spring loaded, like ready to burst forth and gush, at the slightest thing that you do wrong. Like God is angry. And, when you look at a story like this, God can't wait to march in and destroy this city. But actually it's the opposite. It's God's mercy that is pent up. He longs, he doesn't have to be provoked to mercy. He has to be provoked to anger. And so his mercy is already ready to flow at the slightest prick. He longs to show his mercy upon those who cry out for it. And so this story, we've got two stories here, a story of his judgment, a story of his mercy. And he's the kind of judge who he's so merciful. He longs to show mercy on those who don't deserve it. But what makes the difference? Like what in these two stories, what is the difference between those that God, does he just play favorites with the people of Israel? Like what is the difference? Who gets the mercy and who gets the judgment?
Well, I think mercy is available to all of us, right? And, when I think about Jericho, I know you asked about the two stories, but I think about Jericho sitting here like a sitting duck, waiting for the Israel to come. And yet Israel has been in the wilderness. They've had 40 years since the Red Sea happened. They've had 40 years to know, like Rahab knew, that this was the God of heaven, that they could change, that they could find him, that they could seek him, that they could find out about this God. Who is this God?
Yeah.
But he so declared himself. And and so his mercy was you're right, his mercy was always there. But there will come a time where if God is true to who he is, he cannot only be mercy. He has to also say, but also there's a time where you will give an account for your actions.
Yeah. Yep. And that day is coming for Jericho. I mean, I picture them camped across the Jordan. Jericho could see this army. They could have sent somebody over to say, like, how can we ally with you? How can we worship your God? We've heard stories about him and we want to know, like he is God and we want to worship him. But no, they didn't want to surrender to God. They didn't want to worship him. And so they boarded up their city. I mean, we have to acknowledge, like, especially people who read the Bible with a skeptic view, like this is hard. God is taking their land from them. It feels like their land. And yet God doesn't see it that way. Everything in heaven and earth belongs to him. He is the judge. He is the owner. And he doesn't really have to justify or answer to us. And so what's so astonishing is that Rahab sees that. Like every other person in the city of Jericho sees this army camped and they're like, oh my word, this is those terrifying people. We have got to get all of our guns out, all of our defenses up. And Rahab is the only one. This verse is astonishing. She said, when we heard this, verse 11, we lost heart. Everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. She sees God as God of it all. Like there is no other God. He owns all of it. I just find that so astonishing that she hears these stories and comes to that conclusion. That to me is like the most surprising thing about this text. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that she would, that was such a risk for her to leave everything she had known, all the people she'd known.
Yeah.
And maybe they hadn't been good to her. Maybe it was something she was ready to leave, but to throw her whole lot and life in with this God she'd only heard about.
Right.
And you wonder how long she'd heard about him and wondering, would she ever get to know that God? I want to go back real quick because you said about God giving them this land and how that sometimes seems cruel. And yet God was establishing the nation Israel. Again, it was an act of mercy.
Yeah.
They were to be a city on the hill for generations,
Yeah.
so that all nations would come to know God is the true God. So everything he's doing is a revealing. He constantly is revealing who he is so that all people would know. And we see throughout the word, what seems cruel to us is people making choices to either believe that or to not believe that.
Yeah, it's true. He's planting a people in a particular place. And the idea was never exclusivity. Like even in Genesis 12, when God calls Abraham, he says, I want to bless you that you might be a blessing, that through you, all the other nations would be blessed. It's always been by God's design that his people would not be an exclusivity kind of thing where anybody's welcome. Anyone can be a Rahab. Anyone can say, can I be saved by you, God? Anybody. It doesn't matter any nationality. It doesn't matter what, what sin you've committed. There's nobody who's too far gone, who's off limits. Everybody. And that's, I was telling you last time about this man that I was kind of dialoguing with on Instagram. And I didn't get around to saying this, but he was saying, Christians think of themselves as the exception. Everybody else is going to hell, and, they have a certain exception. And he talked about other religions and how nobody else, comes thinking they're the only way. And my thought was, no, Christianity is the only, I don't want to even call it a religion, the mindset, the worldview that anybody's invited in. Anybody. There are no barriers to entry. Any person can come, and they don't have to do anything to receive this kingdom. It is completely free, and it is based on mercy. And the only requirement is to do as Rahab did and cry out for mercy. That's it. And it's yours. It's like God's mercy. It's pent up. It's longing to burst forth. Anybody, his eyes are searching to and fro. Who can I find who's crying out to me, who wants to be saved? And he's excited to do that. Like we talked about last time, you could kind of take out Joshua 2. You could just pluck that out of the story. It's not necessary to the plot, right? These spies that go in, it's a failed, they're terrible spies, and they don't get any information. The whole plan to take Jericho is, go around it 7 times, then the walls collapse. They don't get any information. The only reason for chapter 2 is for God to show his mercy to one woman. And so what that tells me is you don't have to be part of the right family. You don't have to be part of the right country. You don't have to have a certain resume. All you have to do is cry out for God, and he will send a rescue mission to come and get you. I just find that utterly astonishing and so beautiful about God.
Yes, I agree. And God has much more in mind for this woman than to, as you've said, to save her physically. He's much more interested in her spiritual health and for her to know him as God. And we're going to see that line because she's not just in Joshua. She's going to be woven throughout Scripture and really brought into the family of God.
Yeah. Mention that for us. Like what role does she play? So we're not going to be able to get to the story of her being rescued, but basically they're going to capture Jericho. She is going to put this little red
scarlet cord.
Yeah. The scarlet cord.
And anybody under that scarlet cord, which takes you back to the blood painted on the lintel, to come under that scarlet cord will be saved.
Yeah. So she's going to be saved. But talk to us about after. She not only is rescued, she is assimilated into the nation of Israel, right?
Yes. And I love it because it says, I'm trying to look up the verse, but it says that she was rescued, and then she and her family, here it is in
chapter 6.
I can't find it. Yeah, it's in chapter 6. She and her family were put outside the camp.
Yeah.
Because remember, she was not Israelite. She was Gentile. But she doesn't stay outside the camp.
It's verse 23. It's 6:23. So the young men who had scouted went in and brought out Rahab and her father, mother, brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her whole family and settled them outside the camp of Israel. God's promises are like a set of parentheses. The first one is when he makes the promise. The second one is when he keeps it. And you never have one without the other. But often there's this long stretch between the two, much longer than we first imagined, right? That's what we see in Sarah's story found in Genesis 12 through 21. God promised a son, but in this wide stretch between the parentheses, she wondered, would God keep his promises? Could he? I'm Shannon Popkin, inviting you to come find the answer to those questions, both for Sarah and yourself, in my brand new 6-week Bible study titled Shaped by God's Promises, Lessons from Sarah on Fear and Faith. Find out how you too can be shaped by God's promises in the waiting.
But she didn't stay outside the camp.
Yeah.
Because God had more for her. And we find that in the book of Ruth. We find we find that in Matthew. But if we go to Matthew, the first chapter, there's that list of names that you always want to just skip because you think it doesn't mean anything, you know? So we're under the new covenant. The Messiah is going to come. And the book of Matthew, the first book in the New Testament, starts with this list of genealogy. And there are 5 women who are named, and they don't have to be named in order to trace the lineage of Jesus. But God intentionally names these 5 kind of startling women, and one of them is Rahab.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time her story really stuck out to me to say, wow, why would you name her, Lord, in this lineage of, first of all, why would Rahab the harlot be in the lineage of Jesus? Hello. And secondly, why would you call her out like that in scripture so that we would see her when you didn't have to do that? But I think, again, it's a picture of God saying, I can save anyone. It doesn't matter your past. I can save you. And I can use you. It does not matter your past.
Yeah. You're not just this, person sequestered over here. Like, yes, you're saved, but, you're not really a part of the intricate workings of God and his people and his plan for the world. Like, no, she was in the lineage that led to Jesus. She was fully embraced. And I think isn't there some speculation that maybe she married one of these spies?
Well, I don't know because the spies are not named, but we know that she married Salmon. Is his name Salmon or Salmon? I don't know.
Yeah.
Salmon.
Either way.
She married Salmon, and he is the father, and she is the mother of Boaz.
Yes.
And we look at this book of Ruth, and we think, wow, what a man, what a man of God Boaz was. Well, his mother was Rahab. And you look at the mercy he had for Ruth, the responsibility he felt for her, the love that he showed her, even though she was a Gentile. Where did that come from? Well, his mother had been outside the camp and rescued.
Yeah. She was a Canaanite woman. Ruth was a Moabite. These were outsiders who were welcomed in and not, like we said, not just second-class citizens. They had an integral role. It's so beautiful. So what are the false narratives that this part of the story corrects, Lisa? I mean, I think we've kind of just said it, like that you wouldn't be included, that you wouldn't be, anybody can be used by God to do amazing things. But anything else you'd add to that?
No, I would say that's it, that Jesus is only for certain people. I'm not good enough. I wasn't born into the right family. I wasn't raised in church. I don't know enough. I mean, there are so many ways that we can say Jesus, he would never. And he always is for you. Over and over again, we see in the New Testament him stop and look and invite. And that's what he does for all of us.
That's so good. I think this story also corrects false narratives about God, right? That he is a harsh judge, that he is looking for those that he can destroy. I think this flips that on its head. Our God is the God who's looking for the one he can rescue. His eyes are searching the city. Where's the one I can find that I can show my mercy to? I can pour out my mercy upon. And, her story is included in Joshua purposefully. Joshua wants us to know that, Joshua and the overarching story of the Bible, that outsiders are brought in. And so I think that that is a good picture of God. I think it's also something that we can live as though it's true also. Like how can we live like it's true that God's people are not this exclusive, only perfect people kind of narrative?
Well, I probably would go back to my friend who really has illustrated this for me more than anybody, around me. And that it, when I watch her in her ministry to these strip clubs, I think I mentioned it in the first episode. And I watch the way she just loves these women. They don't come in with a devotion ready. Their ticket in is food. And the reason that they are asked to come back is because they just love them where they are. Yeah. And they get to know them. And then once that wall is down, not just between my friend and her coming in, but between the dancers and the outsiders coming in, once that wall is down and they know they can trust these church ladies, they call them, they're invited, they begin to understand what the love of Jesus is. And so I think for all of us just to know that, the story we see, we started out talking about stories. The story we often think we know about somebody is not all there is.
Yeah.
And that if we knew them the way God knows them, that we would, it would be so much easier to love them.
Yeah. Thinking of those church ladies, they could be focused on, I don't want to be misjudged by driving into a strip club. Like I don't want to
Absolutely.
I don't want others to get the wrong impression of what a church lady is. Right. And I think some of us, look at these spies too in the story. They took a huge risk, right? To promise this to Rahab. Like they're putting their life in her hands, trusting that she won't tell on them. Right. And so I think some of us think of those Rahabs in the world, whether at a strip club or even somebody who doesn't come from the right kind of family, like let's say your kid is dating someone who wasn't raised in church, or, your neighbor is someone who she doesn't go to Bible study and she really wants to though, or, just the person who doesn't fit the right mold of what we think a church lady should look like. They kind of can seem risky. I don't want them in my family. I don't want them in my Bible study. Like, what are they going to mess up? And that is not the heart of our God. And so living like this story is true is like, who's your Rahab? And how can you take a risk and invite her in the way that God did, the way that God's people did? God let her be part of the lineage to Christ. Come on, crying out loud. Like if God is willing to do that, like we should save her a seat in Bible study. Like the risk is so minimal, right? Comparatively. So I want to live like it's true toward the Rahabs in my life, but I also want to live like it's true and be a Rahab who says, God, I need your mercy.
Mm-hmm. And I trust you with my whole life. Like, I don't understand. I don't know what this means, but I'm going to trust you.
Yeah. That you're marching against, like, I think for us, looking at there's this final judgment, that's hard, right? I just want to be honest. Like that's hard for me to think of entire groups of people being swept away into final judgment. And yet I don't want that to be a barrier for me crying out to God and his mercy and inviting other people to do the same thing, because Jericho was boarded up. The beginning of chapter 6 opens by saying, now Jericho was strongly fortified because of the Israelites. So it's boarded up, no one leaving or entering. That's how they are responding to this God of judgment. And that's how a lot of people in the world respond to him. They board their hearts up. They board their lives up like, no, thank you. Don't want you, God. But I want to respond like Rahab did. I want to live like it's true that our God is merciful and he will show it to whomever will respond to his mercy. So,
and, we can even bring it down even to like a circumstance today. Because we are all probably facing some circumstance that we think is impossible. Like there is no way out. There's no way God could bring something out of this. And God is God of the impossible. And, for Rahab to be here and to be rescued out in a way that she never could have imagined And that is who God is. And so I think of circumstances in my own life that I need to like have that kind of faith that God will, that the God who saves me is also the God who is going to take me through circumstances that are impossible.
Amen. Amen. Lisa, that was so good. Thank you so much for being my guest and talking about this amazing story. This woman who's been misjudged and a God who's been misjudged, but it's a story of mercy and rescue. I just love it.
We're going to have some questions for her in heaven.
Oh, we
just
are.
Think, when she tells us the story.
We need to have a coffee date, just her and us. And, that'd be great. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Can I just remind you that these stories in the Bible are true stories? They're absolutely true. God could have given us a list of facts about himself, but instead he gave us a book filled with stories. These stories help us to know God, and collectively they help us to understand this overarching story that we are all part of. So I hope this episode will inspire you to study this story for yourself straight from the Bible. To help, I've put together my Live Like It's True workbook. It includes some of my favorite tools for studying the narrative sections of our Bible. Also, we're getting quite a collection of episodes, and we've done some work on the website making it possible for you to search for a particular story of the Bible by section and book of the Bible. Come check that out along with my other books and resources at shannonpopkin.com. Live Like It's True is part of the Resound Media Network. For more gospel-centered resources, go to resoundmedia.cc. We've got that link for you, along with any other links to resources we've mentioned in the show notes. All right, friend, are you ready? Now it's time to go live like it's true.